Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, it's part 9 of the new excavator build. When we finished up on last week's show, we had just finished that walnut air ride boot for underneath the seat of our cab. And what we're going to start with today is making the seat itself. So let's head over to the bench and I'll show you what I have in mind, because we're going to deviate from the plans just a little bit. Well, if we look here at the plans for both the seat bottom and the seat back, there is a 1/16 wide by 1/16 inch deep kerf that is along here as kind of like a detail. It gives it shape. I have done these in the past, and if you're going to do that, you need to shape the seat first and then route afterwards. Make sure that you keep this seat back completely square and only shape the side profile, then route it, then you can shape the sides. That way you have positive reference on the sides of your stock to get a straight routing line. Use push pads, use push blocks, whatever you can to keep your finger away from the bit. I want to do something a little different. And what I've done is I've cut some 3/8 thick walnut and maple, and I have cut the center to be 9/16 like the drawing says, and I have cut the sides to be 1/4 inch. It's a little wider than what we need, but that's okay. What I have here is now I've cut some 1/16 thick by 3/8 maple, and I am going to glue this together and set it aside so that my maple will be in place of these routed lines, kind of like to give it the racing stripe seat sort of thing. So let's get this glued up, and then we'll put that aside and let it dry completely, and we'll come back to that a little later in today's show. The next piece I want to make is going to be this seat side panel number 1. And it is a very simple piece. There are only a couple things that you need to be aware of. Number 1, this angle right here, while it may look like a 45, is actually a 40-degree angle. And this angle right here, it's kind of a little tough to see, but that is a 9-degree angle that coincides with the 9-degree angle at the front of our cab. Now, I've used cherry for mine. You can use whatever you like, but this is what you end up with. I think the next parts that I want to make will be the shift sticks and their mounting block, the pedals, and of course the seat block that will hold it all. So why don't we turn our attention to that? So the first piece that we'll make for this assembly will be the seat block number 1. And this can be a tricky piece, not because it's difficult, but because of its size. So here I have some 1/4 inch thick walnut. It is 3/4 of an inch wide, and I've made it about 4 inches long just to give me some room to play. Now I've marked out the holes that I need. You can see them right there, hopefully. I've center punched them just lightly. Those holes, 3/32 in diameter, they are angled if we look here at the print. And I've measured that angle to be 14 degrees. So the first thing that we want to do is I have cut a block. And this block, coincidentally, is angled at 14 degrees. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to double side tape this so that it is flush with the back of the block and straight across, just like that. Once you get that on there, we can head over to the drill press. Okay, so I'm going to try to explain this procedure in as few words as I possibly can. Yeah, right. You know it's going to be wordy. That's just the way I do things. Guys, what we're going to do is I started off with transferring out these measurements for the holes and that sort of thing. And what I'm going to do instead is just drill the holes and then modify the piece to suit those holes. So what I have is my fence set and a stop block set so that I can get in here and drill the one hole at 3/32 diameter straight through, and that will be at 14 degrees. And I know that according to the prints that the holes are 3/16 of an inch apart. So I have a spacer block here behind our piece to pull it out 3/16 of an inch. That way, after I drill the first hole, I can remove this spacer block, and that will now space the next hole 3/16 of an inch apart from the first one. I hope that made a little bit of sense to you. I'm just going to drill these, and then hopefully we'll show you what I mean from there. So up against the stop block and up against the fence, and we will drill our first hole. And then we can remove our setup block. If you don't have a setup block, just put a piece of 3/16 inch stock in behind there, and it will work the exact same way. And then we'll drill our second hole. And there we have our two 14-degree holes, 3/16 of an inch apart. So I have marked out our length of 1/2 inch on this piece, and I will now proceed to cut it off to that length using our miter box. All right, and now it's time to shape that taper on the front edge. And for that, we're going to head over to the belt sander. So to separate my fingers from the belt sander, I've used double-sided tape like you've seen me do here on this build already, and that will give us the distance that we need, and we can just take that little corner off there to give it the taper that is listed on the plans. And just like that, that little piece is done. Our fingers are all still intact, and everybody's happy. At this point, our two pieces of 3/32 diameter dowel can fit in there. We're not going to glue them in just yet, but at least we know that they're in there, they're at the right angle, and that they're facing the correct way. So the next piece that we want to make will be the pedals. We need to make 2 of them, but I honestly think I'm going to change their design just a little bit, and it's a structure thing for me. So let me show you what I'm going to do. So what I have done for these pedals is I have cut this out of 1/16 inch thick material, and instead of making 2 individual pedals that glue onto the sides of the dowels, it's a very insecure glue contact. There is really no surface there to glue to. What I've done is I've made a connecting link in between these 2 pedals and drilled 2 3/32 diameter holes that coincide with the same dimension apart as what these are. And what I can do is I can slide this down over there and glue it into place, and that will stabilize both the glue connection of the pedals, and it will stabilize my dowels in our stick shifts. Will it change the design? Well, maybe just a little bit, but you know what? You're never going to notice it in the grand scheme of things, and you'll have a much more secure connection here. And down the road, you won't find pedals lying on your cab floor because it got bumped or knocked or broke. So now it's time to make the shift handles. I really don't think we need a video of this. You just need to follow the dimensions on the plan and cut these 2 pieces. And once you get it glued together, we get our shifter and our pedal assembly glued up, and that is all there is to it. It's a pretty fragile piece, so just be careful with it and you should be fine. But I think that that little bridge that I added in the middle is going to go a long way to strengthening it. So we can now turn our attention to the glued up piece that we made for our seats. And the first thing that we want to do over at the table saw is we want to cut the top of this at a 4-degree angle, and we need to make it 1 9/16 of an inch long. So I have also cut a piece that is 1 inch long for the seat cushion bottom, and we can put that one aside for now. What I've done is I've taken the pattern for the seats off the plans, I have photocopied them and cut them out, and these are a marking template. So the first thing we want to do is on our seat back, we want to mark the side profile. And then we will take it over to the belt sander and sand that profile. And I have done the exact same thing for our seat side profile. So now what I want to do is I want to mark the front profile. And from there, we will take it either over to the scroll saw to cut the chair, as there's a little more material to remove, or we can do it at the belt sander, whatever you like. But we will mount, or mark rather, the front profiles on both of our pieces and shape them so that they're roughly shaped to the chair. Well, now we get to use a little bit of artistic license, because I don't like the seats that are on the plans. They look a little too blocky. They're not very realistic. Seats are not solidly flat like that. It just doesn't work that way. So I'm going to use my carving tool with a sanding drum in it to shape the seats, to give them a little more of a contour, to make them look more like seats. If you don't have a carving tool, don't sweat it. Use your Dremel if you've got one. And if that doesn't work, you can just hand sand. But either way, I'm going to get these shaped up. And once you're happy with the contours of your chair, we're going to make the headrest. So on a 1/4 inch thick piece of walnut, I've just applied the pattern. I'm going to cut it at the scroll saw. I'm going to use our little sanding drum here to shape it the way that I want, and then we can get into the assembly of our chair. Okay, so the very first thing that we're going to do is glue the headrest on now that it's shaped. Very sparing on the glue. Don't go crazy with it here. You'll want to try to avoid squeeze out. It's almost impossible to avoid it in this case, but get as little as possible. And you also want to remember that headrest, although it looks here like I am gluing it flat and flush, it is actually not flat and flush. It is kind of tilted forward just a little bit. So we can get that glued in place. We got a little bit of squeeze out there, so let's get that cleaned up and let that set up now. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to glue our seat bottom onto our seat back. So again, sparingly on the glue, and we will put that in place. And now we can take our seat base and glue it onto the bottom of our chair. Now it turns out that when I routed this, I actually screwed it up. I should not have routed this back part here, but it really doesn't matter. It's never going to be visible. So I think we're good. So just get your seat glued now onto your base. And at this point, you should have something that looks like this. So now it's time to glue on our seat sides. What I've done is I've sanded this top armrest part here to give it a little bit of a round over. There's really no guidance on the plans as to where these arms go. So I'm going to use a 5/16 inch thick setup block, and I will just do this and have it 5/16 of an inch up with the back of the seat in line with our seat base. And that, I think, looks about right. So I'm going to get both of these glued up, and then I'll show you what we've got at that point. And this, boys and girls, is what patience looks like. This chair, 4 hours. 4 hours to make a chair. But I'm extremely happy with it, and as far as I'm concerned, it was 4 hours really well spent. I had a blast. So, good times. Get the chair made. It's now time to glue all this stuff in to our cab. So I don't really think we need a video of me gluing this in, but I will show you the end results of what it looks like when it's all in place. And once you're done gluing in your seat, check that out. That is awesome. Now, the cab is just dry fit. We're not going to glue it in until pretty much the end, but I do like the way it's coming along. It looks great. Those interior features are just amazing to add to the model. Now, the shaping on the seat, I even put like a sweet spot where the the employee's butt would sit. So, I mean, no one's ever going to know it's there but me, but it really does add something to the model. We're now going to turn our attention to the cab handrail. And what I've done is I have photocopied the pattern of the cab handrail, and I have drawn a square line from the edge of a piece of 1/4 inch hardboard to the inside edge of each side of the handrail. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over to the scroll saw and I'm going to cut it out following those square lines and then following the inside edge all the way around and ending out here at the end of our board. And what I've ended up with is this. Now, these look like a bunch of random square holes that I've cut in this piece of 1/4 inch hardboard. But in fact, what they are is placement for me to be able to place some small clamps. And the reason for that is that this is not a marking jig or a cutting jig. What this is really is a bending form. And believe it or not, I am going to attempt to bend the 3/32 diameter dowel to form our rails. So for that, I've got to head into the house where I have access to boiling water. So let's head in there and see what kind of mess I can make in my kitchen. So I have a pot of boiling water here. There's just about 1 inch of water in the bottom, and I have 3 dowels. So I'm going to get 3 shots at this. We're just going to throw those in the boiling water, and I'm going to let them boil in there for about 15 minutes. So it's been 15 minutes, and we will take one of these out of here and see how we make out. I'm not sure how pliable they'll be after the 15 minutes, but hopefully we'll be able to get some satisfactory results. They're a little warm, I'll tell you that. So we'll start off at this corner here. We'll just work our way around and place clamps at every corner to try to bend the dowel around the form. Okay, that one's split. We'll try a second one. You really want to work fast as soon as you get it out of the water and start forming it. Okay, I think that one worked. And we'll just let that sit for 24 hours until all the water evaporates out of it, and it should hold that form. Well, truth be told, it's been a week. I clamped this up at the end of the shop day last Sunday, so we're going to unclamp it here and just see what we ended up with. Well, the bending looks all right, but we have some flat areas here from the clamps. That's a little disappointing, but I think I'm going to try to sand that out and see what happens. If I can't get satisfactory results with that, then I will try a different method, possibly using rubber bands to clamp it to my bending jig. But either way, we will now attempt to drill the holes that we need to fit this in place. Well, the very first thing that we want to do is lay our bent dowel over top of our pattern, and we will mark where we want to cut it. Now I'm going to cut mine just a little longer than what it calls for until I'm happy with the fit on the model, and then I can trim it if I need to. So I place those marks there, and I'm just going to cut that using my little miter box. And now, holding our rail in place, we will carefully mark where we want our holes to be so that we can mount it. And now, using a little egg beater style drill, I'm just going to carefully drill the hole that we need, trying to make it as level and as straight as we can into the body of our cab. I have a piece of tape on there, just to mark the maximum depth. All right, and then we can fit our rail into place. All right, well, it can be a little shorter. I did make it longer, like I said, but I think it can be a little bit shorter. I can get this tighter into this radius. And once I get it dry fit in there, I will decide how much I like those flattened rails. I may just end up bending a new one and gluing it in place. All right, there we go. The length is a little better on that. I like that better. I think the bend looks good. I think the fit looks good, but honestly, I just don't like those flat spots there. I think they really take away from the whole visual of that bent dowel. So it's no big deal. I'm going to make a new one. We don't need a video of it. It's the same process. The difference here will be that I won't be using clamps to hold this in place. It's too much pressure on here. Maybe a little bit of tape would help just to hold it in place until the dowel itself dries. So either way, you can get your railing in place. Once you're happy with it, glue it in place, and that, my friends, is the cab completed. And unfortunately, guys, that's all the time that we have for this week. Once again, some great progress made on the build, being able to complete that cab. When we get into next week's show, we're going to start in on the boom assemblies, and that takes a bit of finagling, and well, you know what, we'll work on that next week. Either way, guys, I hope you've enjoyed today's content. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. You click that bell and then you won't miss the future notifications of the show. We are at part 9 here. We're in for the long haul, boys. In for the long haul. So hopefully you're enjoying it. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. I hope you're enjoying the content. I hope that you're following along and trying this for yourself at home. And more importantly, guys, I honestly hope that you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.